My name is Myra Fowler, and I'm 26 years old. Last Christmas, I stood in my dad's kitchen, holding a $5 keychain and saying thank you, while the rest of my family sat frozen, because my grandpa had just told me the keychain was supposed to be a $400,000 apartment. For 2 months, I carried that keychain in my wallet like it meant something. I showed it to friends. I polished the little silver logo with my sleeve. My dad watched me do all of that and never said a word, because he'd already given the apartment to someone else. The worst part wasn't the money. It was realizing that every time my dad told me Grandpa was confused and getting old, he was buying himself one more day before the truth caught up. It caught up at Christmas dinner, in front of 12 people, and my dad's face told me everything his mouth had been hiding for 60 days. Before I tell you what happened next, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if this story earns it. Drop your location and local time in the comments. I love knowing where you're listening from. Now let me take you back to October, 2 months before that dinner, the night I turned 26. I was 12 when my dad married Diane. Emma was 10. The first thing that changed was my bedroom. I'd had the big room at the end of the hall since I was 4. The one with 2 windows and the oak tree outside. 3 days after Diane moved in, my dad sat me down at the kitchen table and told me Emma needed that room because she was having a hard time adjusting. "You're older," he said. "You understand these things." So I packed my stuff into garbage bags and moved into the small room next to the water heater. The one with no windows and a door that didn't lock properly. I was 12. I understood nothing. But I nodded, because my dad looked tired, and I didn't want to be the reason he looked even more tired. That became the pattern. Every time there was a choice between making Emma comfortable and keeping things fair for me, my dad chose comfort. Emma got the new winter coat. I got her hand-me-down, even though she was 2 years younger and 3 inches shorter. Emma got driving lessons at 16. I got a bus pass and a reminder that gas was expensive. When Richard and Diane took a family vacation to Myrtle Beach, they booked a room with 2 queen beds, one for them, one for Emma. I slept on a rollaway cot they rented from the front desk for $12 a night. I stopped counting after a while. Not because it didn't hurt, but because keeping score made it hurt more. The only constant was Grandpa Harold. My grandmother, his wife Margaret, passed when I was 10. After that, Harold became the person who showed up. Every summer when my dad was too busy to have me around, I'd ride a Greyhound 4 hours north to Harold's house in Carver Falls. He taught me to cook, to sand wood, to change a tire. He never once forgot my birthday. I didn't know it then, but that small bedroom would be the first of many things I'd lose to Emma. The apartment would be the last. I moved out at 18, rented a room above a laundromat on Birch Street, got a job as a lab assistant at the community hospital, and started paying my own bills. No fanfare, no going-away dinner. My dad helped me carry 2 boxes to my car and said, "Call if you need anything," then went back inside to watch the game with Diane. I never called. Not because I was proud, because every time I thought about asking for help, I'd picture the spreadsheet in my head. Emma's college tuition, paid. Emma's car insurance, covered. Emma's dental work, her laptop, her sorority dues, all handled. My column had one entry, a bus pass, so I figured it out on my own. I picked up extra shifts. I got certified as a full lab technician. I ate rice and beans 4 nights a week and pretended it was a choice. That's where I met June Calloway. She started at the hospital 6 months after me. 28, sharp tongue, 0 patience for nonsense. We became close the way people do when they work 12-hour shifts together. Slowly, then all at once. One night over takeout in the break room, I mentioned that my dad forgot my birthday again. 3rd year in a row. June put down her chopsticks and looked at me like I'd just told her I was sleeping on the floor. "Again?" "It happens. He's got a lot going on." "Girl, your dad didn't blend a family. He replaced a daughter." I laughed it off, told her she was being dramatic. But her words sat in my chest like a stone I couldn't swallow, and I spent the whole drive home trying to cough it up. Harold, of course, had called at 7 a.m. sharp, same as every year. Same birthday song, slightly more off-key each time. 3 months before Christmas, Harold had hip surgery. I drove to Carver Falls every weekend, 4 hours each way, to help him recover. I'd arrive Saturday morning, clean the house, stock the fridge, cook enough meals to last the week, and drive back Sunday night in time for my Monday shift. Richard visited once in 3 months, stayed 2 hours, spent most of it on his phone, texting Diane about some issue with Emma's new furniture. Harold noticed. He didn't say much. He never did. But one afternoon, while I was heating soup on his stove, he said something that landed different. "You're just like your grandmother. She never complained either. But I want you to know something, Myra. I see everything." 2 weeks later, Harold called his real estate attorney. He found a 2-bedroom apartment in Millbrook, 20 minutes from the hospital where I worked, listed at $398,000. He wired $412,000 to Richard's bank account, enough to cover the purchase price, closing costs, and fees. The transfer memo read, "Apartment purchase for Myra Fowler." Harold couldn't travel. His hip was still healing, and Carver Falls was a long drive from Millbrook. So he asked his son, his only son, to handle the paperwork. "Get it in Myra's name," he told Richard. "The title, the deed, everything. Give her the keys on her birthday." Richard said, "Yes, Dad, I'll take care of it." Harold hung up and smiled. He told me later that he sat in his recliner that evening, imagining the look on my face when I'd open the door to my own home for the first time. He had no idea that the only thing I'd open was a box with a keychain inside. October 14th, my birthday. Harold called at 7 a.m. like clockwork, but his voice sounded different, lighter, almost giddy. "Happy birthday, sweetheart. Have you gotten your gift from your dad yet?" "Not yet, Grandpa. I'm sure it's coming." "Good, good. I really hope you love it." He sounded like a kid who couldn't keep a secret. I figured he'd chipped in on something nice, maybe a new set of cookware or that portable heater I'd mentioned for my drafty room. I didn't push. I called Richard that evening. He sounded distracted. "Oh, right. Happy birthday, Myra. Yeah, I've got something from Dad for you. Let me send it over." 2 days later, a small package arrived at my door. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper, was a keychain, brushed silver, stamped with a logo I didn't recognize. A little house inside a circle with the words Meridian Realty Group underneath. Tucked beside it, a handwritten card. "Happy birthday, Myra. From Grandpa. Love, Dad." I turned it over in my hands. It was nice enough. A little impersonal for Harold, who usually gave things with a story behind them. A pocket knife that belonged to my grandmother, a cookbook with his notes in the margins. But I figured maybe his recovery had slowed him down. I called Harold that night. "Grandpa, I got your gift. Thank you so much. I love it." "You looked at everything? Everything in the box?" "The keychain? Yes. It's beautiful. I already put it on my wallet." A pause. Long enough that I almost asked if the call dropped. Then Harold said quietly, "All right, sweetheart. As long as you're happy." He wanted to say more. I could feel it. But he didn't, and I didn't ask. And that silence between us carried the weight of everything I didn't yet know. Let me tell you about my apartment, the one I was actually living in. 410 square feet above a laundromat. One window that stuck shut in the humidity. A bathroom where the shower ran cold every other Tuesday because the building's water heater couldn't keep up. The landlord, Mr. Petty, and yes, that was his real name, had just raised the rent by $160. No notice. Just a note taped to my door. After rent, health insurance, gas for the weekend drives to Carver Falls, and groceries, I had about $90 left each month. $90 between me and an emergency I couldn't afford. June asked me once, during a night shift, whether my dad ever helped out financially. He's got Emma's college loans to worry about. June didn't even look up from her chart. Emma graduated 2 years ago. I changed the subject. I always change the subject. A week later, June was scrolling through her phone during lunch and stopped mid-bite. "Hey, isn't Emma your stepsister?" "Yeah, why?" She turned the screen toward me. Emma's Instagram story. A selfie in front of a freshly painted front door, a set of keys dangling from her fingers. The caption read, "My own place. Thank you, Mom and Dad. Best surprise ever." The background showed a brick building, 2 stories, balcony with an iron railing. A neighborhood I recognized. It was in Millbrook, 5 minutes from the hospital. "Good for her," I said, and I meant it. I didn't feel jealous. I felt the same thing I always felt. That dull, familiar acceptance that Emma's life had a safety net and mine had a bus pass. I didn't make the connection. Not yet. That would come later, piece by piece, like a puzzle I didn't know I was solving. November 1st. Harold called again. Myra, have you moved into the apartment yet? I laughed. What apartment, Grandpa? Silence. Not the comfortable kind. The kind that presses against your eardrums. The one your father was supposed to give you. The one I paid for. My stomach dropped. Grandpa, Dad gave me a keychain from a real estate company. He said that was the gift. Harold didn't speak for 10 seconds. I counted, then very quietly. I see. Let me call your father. He hung up before I could ask anything else. I called Richard 20 minutes later. My hands weren't steady. Dad, Grandpa just said he paid for an apartment for me. What's he talking about? Richard's voice shifted. Too casual, too quick. Oh, honey. Dad gets confused sometimes. He thought he was buying something, but the deal fell through. You know how it is at his age. He sounded pretty clear to me. Myra, I'm telling you, there's no apartment. The keychain was the gift. That's it. Then why did he mention it? Because he's 78, and he mixes things up. Don't make this a thing. I wanted to believe him. Believing him was easier. Believing him meant I didn't have to rethink 14 years of excuses I'd made on his behalf. Okay, Dad. I called Harold back. Grandpa, Dad said the apartment didn't work out. Some kind of mix-up. Don't worry about it. Harold was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and measured, the way it got when he was angry but choosing his words with care. I see. We'll talk at Christmas, Myra. I thought he was confused. I thought my dad was telling the truth. I thought the keychain was the gift. I was wrong about all three. Mid-November. Diane called me. That alone should have been a red flag. Diane didn't call me. In 14 years, I could count our one-on-one phone conversations on one hand. But there she was, her name glowing on my screen on a Tuesday night. Myra, hi, just checking in. How are you, sweetie? Sweetie. She'd never called me sweetie. I'm fine, Diane. What's up? Well, your dad and I have been a little worried about Grandpa Harold. He's been saying some confused things lately, mixing up names, talking about purchases he never made. We think it might be early memory issues. I gripped the edge of my kitchen counter. He seemed fine when I talked to him. That's the thing with cognitive decline. It comes and goes. One minute they're sharp, the next they're convinced they bought a house. We just don't want you to take everything he says at face value right now. Did something specific happen? He called your dad ranting about some apartment. Made no sense. Your dad tried to calm him down, but you know Harold. I thought about my last call with Harold. The careful anger in his voice. The way he said, "We'll talk at Christmas." That didn't sound confused. That sounded deliberate. Okay, I'll keep that in mind. And honey, please don't bring up the apartment thing when you talk to him. It really upsets him. I said I wouldn't. We hung up. I sat on my bed and stared at the wall. Then I dialed Harold. We talked for 45 minutes. He told me about the biography he was reading, recited last Sunday's sermon from memory word for word, and gave me a detailed breakdown of the Eagles game. Formations, penalties, play calls. Every detail precise. Every fact checked out when I looked later. Sharp as a scalpel. I drove to Richard's store the following Saturday. Fowler Building Supply. A small outfit on Route 9 that sold lumber and drywall to local contractors. He was behind the counter, marking invoices. Dad, I need to talk to you. He didn't look up. About what? About Grandpa. He says he bought me an apartment, paid for it, sent you the money. Richard's pen stopped. He set it down carefully. Myra, we've been over this. I know what you told me. I want to hear it again, to my face. He exhaled through his nose. Dad gets confused sometimes. You already said that. Because it's true. He doesn't seem confused, Dad. He thought he bought something. He didn't. End of story. Then why did the keychain come from a real estate company? His jaw tightened. Just barely. Most people wouldn't catch it. But I'd spent a lifetime reading Richard Fowler's face for the smallest signals of approval. I knew every micro-expression he owned. It was a promotional item. They hand those out at open houses. So Grandpa went to an open house? With a broken hip? Richard's voice hardened. You know what your problem is? You always think people owe you something. The words hit like a slap. Not because they were true, because they came from my father, and his first instinct when cornered was to attack the person asking questions. I picked up my keys and walked out. In the parking lot, I glanced toward the row of cars near the dumpster. Diane's silver Nissan sat in the far corner, engine running. She was behind the wheel, phone in hand, watching the front door of the store. She'd been there the entire time. I pulled onto Route 9, and for the first time in 26 years, I let myself finish a thought I'd been swallowing since I was 12. Something is very wrong in this family. Monday, break room, 2 a.m. June and I were splitting a gas station sandwich when I told her everything. Harold's calls, Richard's denials, Diane's sudden concern about Grandpa's memory. June listened without interrupting. Then she set down her half and held up 3 fingers. 1. Your grandpa says he bought you an apartment. 2. Your dad says there is no apartment. 3. Your stepsister just moved into a brand new apartment in the same town, out of nowhere. She folded down each finger. Pick the lie, Myra. Maybe it's a coincidence. A coincidence that costs exactly what your grandpa said he spent? I pulled the keychain from my wallet and set it on the table between us. June picked it up, turned it over, read the logo out loud. Meridian Realty Group. Then she opened her phone, typed the name into a search bar, and held the screen toward me. Meridian Realty Group. Licensed residential brokerage. Millbrook, New York. She tapped into their recent listings. Third one down, a 2-bedroom, 2-bath on Crane Street. Brick building, iron railing balcony. Listed at $398,000. Status, sold. The listing photo matched the background of Emma's Instagram story. Down to the balcony, down to the freshly painted front door. That's Emma's apartment, I whispered. That's your apartment. June tapped the keychain against the table. And this is the receipt they forgot to hide. I didn't cry. I didn't throw anything. I sat there holding a cheap piece of brushed silver, realizing that my own father had wrapped up the evidence of his betrayal in tissue paper and mailed it to me with a birthday card. The keychain had the same logo as the company that sold Emma's apartment. And suddenly, the freebie made perfect sense. I wanted to call Harold that night and tell him everything. But every time I picked up the phone, I put it back down. If I was right, I'd lose my father. Not in the dramatic, door-slamming way, in the quiet way. The way you lose someone when you finally see them clearly and realize the person you loved was a version you invented. If I was wrong, I'd be the ungrateful daughter who accused her dad of theft based on a keychain and an Instagram post. June sat with me on my apartment steps that night, drinking coffee from paper cups. What are you going to do? Grandpa said he's coming for Christmas. He never comes. His hip, the distance. But this year he insisted. Then wait. Talk to him face to face. No phone, no middleman. Just you and him in the same room. And if Diane tries to manage the conversation? 12 people at a dinner table? She can manage a lot of things, but she can't manage Harold. I chose to wait. Not out of fear, because Harold deserved to hear the truth directly from me, and I deserved to hear his answer without Richard translating it. 4 days later, my phone buzzed. Group text from Diane. Christmas dinner at our place. Everyone's coming. So excited to have the whole family together. Then a separate message, just to me. Myra, I really hope you'll come this year. Family should be complete. Family should be complete. In 14 years, Diane had never once used the word family in a sentence that included me. Now she was texting it at midnight with a heart emoji. Diane had never called me family in 14 years, and now she wanted me at Christmas dinner. That should have been my first warning, but it turned out to be her biggest mistake. I need to pause here for a second, because right now, standing in my tiny apartment with a keychain in my wallet and a knot in my stomach, I'm making a decision that's going to change everything. And I want to ask you, if you were me, if your own father looked you in the eye and told you you were imagining things, would you trust your gut or let it go? Drop your answer in the comments, and if this story is hitting close to home, please share it. Someone in your life might need to hear it. Okay, Back to December. Early December. Harold called me on a Sunday evening. His voice was calm, calmer than it had been in weeks. The kind of calm that comes from making a decision and being at peace with it. Myra, I'm coming for Christmas this year. Grandpa, your hip. My hip is fine. Linda's driving me down. There are things I need to see with my own eyes. Harold almost never came south for the holidays. The drive was too long, the house was too loud, and he'd told me once that watching Diane host a dinner made him miss Margaret so much he could barely eat. For him to insist, to ride 4 hours in a car with a hip that was still healing, meant something had shifted. Okay, I said. I'll be there. One more thing. That keychain. Do you still have it? Of course. It's in my wallet. Good. Bring it to dinner. I frowned. Why? Because I gave it to you, and I'd like to see you carrying it. Something in his voice told me not to press, so I said I would, and I meant it. After we hung up, I sat at my kitchen table and turned the keychain over in my fingers. Meridian Realty Group. The little house logo. My grandpa didn't go to an open house with a broken hip. He didn't collect random promotional items. He wired over $400,000 to his son's bank account and trusted him to do the right thing. And now he was driving 4 hours in winter to sit at that same son's dinner table on Christmas Day. Why would Grandpa want me to bring a keychain to Christmas dinner? I'd find out. And so would everyone else at that table. 2 weeks before Christmas, I was cleaning out my closet when I found the box. The birthday box, the one Richard had mailed with the keychain inside. I'd tossed it on the closet shelf back in October and forgotten about it. Now I pulled it down, sat on my bed, and looked at it again. Small, brown cardboard. Some tissue paper still crumpled inside. I almost threw it out. Then I noticed something at the bottom, a scrap of paper stuck to the cardboard with a dried strip of packing tape. I peeled it off carefully. It was the corner of a document. Thick paper, the kind used for legal filings. I could make out part of a company letterhead, Meridian Realty Grow, and below that, printed in neat black type, a partial name, Myra Fow. The rest had been torn away. Whoever packed this box had ripped out a legal document and hadn't noticed that one corner stayed stuck to the tape at the bottom. My hands shook. This wasn't a keychain from an open house. This wasn't a confused old man inventing purchases. This was a closing document, a real estate transfer, with my name on it. Someone had torn it out of the box and replaced it with a $5 promotional keychain. I sat on my bed for 20 minutes without moving. Then I called June. They ripped my name off a legal document and shoved a keychain in its place. June was quiet for 3 seconds. Christmas is in 2 weeks. Let your grandpa handle it. He asked you to bring the keychain for a reason. I put the scrap of paper in my wallet, next to the keychain. 2 pieces of the same lie, pressing against each other every time I sat down. 3 days before Christmas, Diane sent a group text to the entire family. A detailed schedule of who was bringing what dish, arrival times, parking instructions. She ran Christmas the way she ran everything, with spreadsheets and assigned seating. At the bottom of the message, reminder, Grandpa Harold will be joining us this year. He's been a little fragile lately, so let's keep things light. No heavy topics, no stressful conversations, just love and family. I read that last line 3 times. No heavy topics, no stressful conversations. She was pre-framing the evening. If Harold brought up the apartment, she'd already planted the idea that he was fragile, confused, not to be taken seriously. The next day, Richard texted me privately. Just me. No group chat. Myra, please don't bring up the apartment at dinner. It'll upset Dad. He's not well. I stared at the message for a long time. He wasn't asking me to protect Harold. He was asking me to protect himself. I typed back, I won't bring up anything, Dad. I'm just coming for dinner. And I meant every word. I wouldn't need to bring up anything. Harold was doing the driving, the arriving, and I was starting to understand. The talking. All I had to do was show up, say thank you for a keychain, and let the truth do what truth does when you stop trying to bury it. But I noticed something in Richard's text. The careful phrasing, the specific request. He wasn't confused about what Harold might say. He knew exactly what his father was planning. Richard was afraid. And that told me everything I needed to know. He wasn't protecting Grandpa's feelings. He was protecting his own secret. And secrets, I was learning, have a shelf life. December 25th, 4:30 p.m. I pulled into Richard and Diane's driveway behind a row of cars I mostly recognized. Aunt Linda's green Subaru, her husband Tom's pickup, a rental sedan that must have been for Harold. The house looked like a catalog photo. Wreaths on every window, lights along the gutters, a doormat that said blessed in gold script. Diane's touch, everything polished, nothing real. I walked in carrying a dish of roasted vegetables and the keychain in my wallet. The living room was full. Linda and Tom were on the couch with their two kids, teenagers now, both glued to their phones. Richard stood by the fireplace, holding a glass of something amber, staring into it like it might give him advice. Diane was in the kitchen, conducting the meal like an orchestra, giving instructions to Emma while smiling at everyone who passed through. And there was Harold. He sat in his wheelchair near the kitchen island, a plaid blanket across his lap. He looked thinner than the last time I'd seen him, but his eyes were the same, sharp, steady, missing nothing. Beside his chair, tucked against the wheel, was a worn leather briefcase. The old one with the brass buckles that used to sit in his workshop. Nobody asked about the briefcase. I noticed it. I didn't ask either. When Harold saw me, his face changed. He reached out both hands and I bent down to hug him. He held on longer than usual. "You look good, sweetheart," he whispered. "So do you, Grandpa." He pulled back and looked at me. "You brought it?" I patted my jacket pocket. "Right here." He nodded once. Then he went back to stirring his pot of sauce on the stove. His grandmother's recipe, the one he made every Christmas he attended. Slow circles, wooden spoon, eyes on the room. Dinner was served at 6. Diane had outdone herself. Glazed ham, 3 kinds of potatoes, homemade rolls. 12 place settings, candles, a Spotify playlist of instrumental Christmas music at exactly the right volume to feel intentional. She clinked her glass halfway through the main course and stood. "I just want to take a moment to say how grateful I am for this family, for this table, for everyone being here." She looked at Harold and smiled the smile she reserved for audiences. "And I'm especially proud of Emma this year. She's really growing up, got her own apartment, started building her life." She raised her glass. "To Emma." The table raised their glasses. I raised mine. Aunt Linda turned to me, polite the way she always was, warm but careful. "And how about you, Myra? Any big moves?" "Still renting, saving up." Diane tilted her head. That particular tilt, the one that comes with a voice pitched just above sympathy and just below pity. "Well, not everyone moves at the same pace. You'll get there, honey." A few people smiled. Nobody challenged it. Richard stared at his plate. I looked at Harold. He was at the end of the table nearest the kitchen, his pot of sauce still simmering on the stove behind him. His spoon rested across the rim. He wasn't eating. He was watching. Then Emma said something she shouldn't have. She was talking to Tom's older kid, casual, laughing, riding the high of Diane's toast. "The apartment is amazing. I still can't believe Dad just gave it to me." She said it like it was nothing, like it was a pair of earrings or a sweater. Harold's hand stopped on the table. His head turned, slowly, like a searchlight finding its target. And the air in that dining room changed. After dinner, people drifted into the living room for dessert and gift exchange. I waited until the noise settled, then walked over to Harold. He was still by the kitchen island, hands resting on the arms of his wheelchair, watching the room the way a man watches a house he built start to lean. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out the keychain, held it up so he could see it. "Grandpa, I never properly thanked you in person. Thank you for this. I carry it with me everywhere." Harold looked at the keychain. Then he looked at me. Then, slowly, he looked at Richard, who was standing by the Christmas tree with a glass in his hand. 5 seconds of silence. Maybe 6. In a room full of 12 people, 6 seconds of silence sounds like a scream. Harold set down his spoon. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "Myra, I didn't give you a keychain." Every conversation in the room stopped. "I bought you a $400,000 apartment in Millbrook, 20 minutes from your hospital." I wired the money to your father in August and asked him to put your name on the deed. He held the keychain up to the light. This? This is a freebie. The real estate company gives these out at closing. It was supposed to be in the folder with your paperwork. 12 people, 12 forks down, 12 pairs of eyes moving to Richard. Diane's hand froze on her wineglass, halfway to her lips. Richard's face went from tan to ash. The color drained so fast it was like watching someone pull a plug. And Emma? Emma looked at her mother like she was seeing a stranger for the first time. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. The only sound was Harold's pot of sauce, still bubbling on the stove behind him. Harold turned to Richard. His voice was level, controlled. The voice of a man who'd spent 4 hours in a car rehearsing exactly what he'd say. "Where is Myra's apartment, Richard?" Richard opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "Dad, I can explain." "I didn't ask for an explanation. I asked where the apartment is." Diane stepped forward. "Harold, there was a misunderstanding. The money wasn't enough to cover. I transferred $412,000 to your husband's account. I have the bank receipt with his name on it. Don't insult me." Aunt Linda set down her dessert plate. "Wait, what?" Tom leaned forward in his chair. The teenagers looked up from their phones for the first time all night. Emma's fork clattered against her plate. She didn't pick it up. "Mom, is that true? Is my apartment—" Diane's voice went up half an octave. "Emma, sweetie, this isn't the time. This is exactly the time." Harold hadn't moved from his wheelchair. He didn't need to. His voice filled the room the way a judge's fills a courtroom, quiet, final, leaving no space for argument. "I gave my son $412,000 to buy an apartment for my granddaughter. My granddaughter received a keychain, and your daughter is living in a 2-bedroom on Crane Street that she thinks her stepfather bought with his own money." Diane's mouth opened and shut. Richard gripped his glass so hard his knuckles went white. Linda looked at her brother. "Richard, tell me he's wrong." Richard didn't look up. He didn't say a word. And that silence, louder than any confession, told the whole room everything it needed to know. Harold reached down beside his wheelchair and pulled the leather briefcase onto his lap. The brass buckles clicked open. 2 small, sharp sounds that cut through the silence like snapping bones. He pulled out a folder. Manila. Thick. He opened it on the table, pushing aside a gravy boat and a basket of rolls. "Bank transfer receipt. August 19th. $412,000 from my savings account to Richard Fowler's checking account." He slid the paper toward Linda. Memo line reads, "Apartment purchase for Myra Fowler." Linda picked it up, read it. Her face flushed red. Not embarrassment. Anger. Harold pulled out a second sheet. "Email confirmation from my attorney, Paul Weston, to Richard Fowler, dated August 20th. Subject line, closing instructions for Crane Street property, title to be registered under Myra Fowler." He set that one next to the first. "I kept copies of everything. Your grandmother taught me one thing about trust. You give it freely, but you document it." Linda held both papers side by side, her eyes scanning back and forth. Then she looked up at her brother. "You took Dad's money and put the apartment in Emma's name?" Richard's jaw worked, but nothing came out. Diane stepped in. "It was a family decision. We thought it made more sense for Emma because Myra is independent. She doesn't need— You don't get to decide what my granddaughter needs." Harold's voice didn't rise. It got lower, the way a storm gets quieter before the worst of it hits. "I decided. I wrote the check, I gave the instructions, and you stole it." Diane flinched. Actually flinched. Like the word stole had hit her across the face. The room was so quiet I could hear the ice shifting in Tom's glass. Diane's eyes filled with tears. On cue, like a faucet she'd been waiting to turn. "You don't understand, Harold. I love Myra like my own. I love both girls equally. We just thought Emma needed it more. She's been struggling. She doesn't have Myra's resilience. We were trying to be fair." Harold stared at her. "If you loved her equally, her name would be on that deed." Diane pressed her hand to her chest. "I know how this looks, but I raised Myra. I was there for 14 years. You were in the house for 14 years. Linda's voice was sharp, sharper than I'd ever heard from her. Being in the house isn't the same thing as being there. The room shifted. Linda stood up from the table, and when she spoke, she wasn't looking at Diane. She was looking at everyone. I should have said something years ago. I watched this happen, the hand-me-downs, the forgotten birthdays, the rollaway caught on family vacations while Emma got the real bed. I told myself it wasn't my place, that Richard would handle it, that Myra was okay. She looked at me. I'm sorry, Myra. You weren't okay, and I should have spoken up. I didn't trust myself to speak. I nodded. Diane tried to redirect. Linda, this is between our family. Harold is my father too. Myra is my niece. This is exactly my family. Richard stood in the corner by the Christmas tree, a glass in one hand, the other rubbing the back of his neck. His wife was crying. His sister was furious. His father was sitting 6 feet away with a stack of evidence on the table. And his daughter, the one he'd sold out, was standing by the kitchen island, holding a cheap keychain, saying nothing. He was running out of corners to hide in. Richard set his glass down on the mantel and walked toward Harold. He moved like a man crossing thin ice, slow, deliberate, trying not to crack what was already breaking. Dad, please, I'll fix this. I'll transfer the apartment back to Myra's name. Just, can we do this privately? Privately. Harold repeated the word like he was tasting something rotten. You had 2 months to fix this privately. You chose to lie to my face. I know I did, but it's complicated. Uncomplicate it. Richard glanced at Diane. She gave him a look, small, fast, warning, but he was past listening to warnings. I owe money to Diane's family. Her brother loaned me $60,000 for the store expansion 3 years ago. I haven't paid it back. When Dad sent the money for the apartment, Diane said, he stopped, swallowed. She said if I didn't put it in Emma's name, she'd have her brother call the loan. I'd lose the store. The room absorbed that. Tom let out a slow breath. Linda closed her eyes. Harold didn't blink. So you sold your daughter for a debt? Richard's face crumpled. Not dramatically, just a slow collapse, like a wall that had been holding too long. I didn't think of it that way. That's exactly how it is. From across the room, Emma spoke. Her voice was thin, stripped of the confidence she'd carried all evening. Wait, Mom? You knew? The apartment was Myra's this whole time? Diane didn't answer. Mom, I did what I had to do for this family. You did what you had to do for me. There's a difference. Emma pushed back from the table. Her chair scraped against the hardwood, a sound that made everyone wince. She walked toward the hallway and stopped at the doorway, not turning around. Emma turned around in the doorway. Mom, you told me Dad bought the apartment as a graduation gift. You said he'd been saving for 2 years. You looked me in the eye and told me that. Emma, honey, was any of it true? Diane's tears were still falling, but the performance was flickering. I did it for you. Everything I've ever done has been for you. Your father left us with nothing. I promised myself you would never go without, by taking from someone else? Emma's voice cracked. Mom, that makes us exactly like him. The room went still. Tom's kids were frozen on the couch. Linda had her hand over her mouth. Harold sat motionless, his hands folded in his lap, watching his family fracture along lines he hadn't built but could see clearly. Diane reached for Emma's arm. Please, let me explain. Emma pulled away. You don't get to explain stealing and call it love. She looked at me. For the first time all evening, maybe for the first time in years, she actually looked at me. Not past me, not through me, at me. Myra, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know where the money came from. I believe you, I said. And I did. Emma wasn't the architect. She was the beneficiary who'd never thought to read the fine print. Emma turned and walked down the hallway. A door closed softly. Not a slam, something quieter and sadder than that. Diane stood alone in the middle of the dining room, arms at her sides, tears running down a face that nobody was buying anymore. Richard hadn't moved from where Harold had pinned him with 5 words. The Christmas music was still playing, some instrumental version of Silent Night. The irony was thick enough to choke on. The room was waiting. I could feel it, 12 people holding their breath, wondering if I'd scream, cry, or storm out. I did none of those things. I stood up from where I'd been leaning against the kitchen island. I straightened my jacket, and I spoke. "Dad?" Richard looked at me. His eyes were red. His hands were shaking. "I spent 14 years trying to earn a place in this family. I kept my head down. I didn't complain. I didn't ask for anything. And you used every single one of those things against me. My silence wasn't acceptance. It was trust. And you spent it like currency." Richard opened his mouth. I held up my hand, not aggressively, just enough. "Diane." She looked at me through wet mascara. "You called me family 3 days ago in a group text. That was the first time in 14 years you used that word in a sentence that included me. And the only reason you did it was because you needed me at this table so Grandpa wouldn't get suspicious." Diane started to speak. I shook my head once. "I'm not angry. I'm done. There's a difference." I let that land. Then I turned to Harold. He was watching me with an expression I'd never seen on him before. Not pride exactly, but something close. Recognition. Like he was seeing Margaret in me, and it steadied something in his chest. "Grandpa, thank you. Not for the apartment. For being the one person in this family who never forgot my name." Harold reached out and took my hand. His grip was firm, stronger than a 78-year-old man in a wheelchair had any right to be. He squeezed once and nodded. He didn't need to say anything. Neither did I. The room was silent, and for the first time in my life, my silence wasn't submission. It was a wall I chose to build. I'm going to stop here for just a moment, because this is the part that still makes my hands shake when I tell it. Standing in that dining room, in front of 12 people, saying the words I'd swallowed for 14 years. It felt like stepping off a cliff. If you've ever had to stand up to someone you love and say, "I'm done," you know exactly what I mean. Hit that like button if you've been there. And if you haven't yet, but you know you need to, save this video. You might want to come back to it. Now, here's what happened next. Harold released my hand and reached for his phone. It was an old flip phone, the kind Diane probably would have cited as evidence of his declining mind. He pressed a number on speed dial and hit the speaker button. The room could hear every ring. A man picked up on the third one. "Harold, Merry Christmas." "Merry Christmas, Paul. I'm sorry to call on a holiday, but I'm sitting at my son's dinner table, and I've just learned that the apartment I paid for, the one that was supposed to be titled in my granddaughter Myra Fowler's name, was registered under someone else's name instead." A beat of silence. Then Paul's voice, careful and professional. "I'll pull the file first thing Monday, Harold. Based on what you described and the documentation we have, this is a clear breach of fiduciary trust. We have strong grounds to correct the title." "Thank you, Paul. I'll send you the details tonight." Harold closed the phone and set it on the table beside the folder of receipts. Richard stepped forward. "Dad, please, don't involve lawyers. I said I'll fix it." Harold looked at his son. "You had 2 months and a phone call to fix it. You chose to lie to me, lie to Myra, and let your wife tell my granddaughter that I was losing my mind." Richard's mouth opened. Nothing came out. "Monday morning, it goes through my attorney." Diane's voice came from somewhere behind Richard, high, fractured. "This is insane. You're tearing this family apart over a piece of property." Harold didn't turn to face her. He didn't need to. "No, you tore this family apart when you taught my son to steal from his own daughter. I'm just turning the lights on." The speakerphone call lasted 45 seconds. It rewrote the next 20 years of this family. Richard sat down, not in a chair, on the edge of the stone hearth by the fireplace, like his legs had simply decided they were finished. He stared at the floor for a long moment, then rubbed his face with both hands. "I'll sign it over, the apartment. I'll transfer it back to Myra." Diane spun toward him. "Richard, don't sign anything without consulting." "Diane, stop." His voice was flat, emptied out. "I should have done this 2 months ago." Harold reached into the briefcase again. He pulled out a single sheet of paper and a pen and slid both across the table toward Richard. "Written commitment to initiate the title transfer within 5 business days. My attorney drafted it before I left Carver Falls." Linda looked at Harold. "You came prepared." "I came hoping I wouldn't need to be." Richard picked up the pen. His hand hovered over the line. Diane put her hand on his shoulder. He shrugged it off, a small motion, but the first time I'd ever seen him do it. He signed. Harold folded the paper, placed it back in the briefcase, and buckled it shut. Then Richard looked at me. His eyes were red and glassy, and for a moment he looked like the father I remembered from before Diane, tired, out of his depth, trying to do the right thing and choosing the easy thing instead. "I'm sorry, Myra." 2 words. No speech, no justification. Just 2 words and a face that knew they weren't enough. "I know, Dad." I didn't say, "I forgive you." I didn't say, "It's okay." Because it wasn't okay, and forgiveness isn't something you hand out at a dinner table between the ham and the dessert. But I looked at him, and I let him see that I heard him. That was all I could give. Harold wasn't finished. "One more thing." His voice carried the weight of a man who'd been thinking about this for weeks. "Paul is also updating my will. Richard, your share of my estate will be placed in a trust managed by Linda until I'm satisfied that you understand what family is supposed to mean." Richard's head dropped. He didn't argue. He didn't have the standing. Linda nodded slowly. She didn't look happy about the responsibility, but she accepted it the way people accept things they know are necessary. Harold turned his wheelchair toward me. "The apartment is yours, Myra. It always was. Don't let anyone, not your father, not Diane, not even me, make you feel like you have to earn what's rightfully yours." His voice cracked on the next words. "Just barely. Just enough. Your grandmother would be proud of you." I bent down and hugged him. He smelled like cedar and the fennel he put in his sauce. He held on for a long time, and I let him. Then something happened that I didn't expect. A door opened down the hall. Footsteps. Emma walked back into the dining room. Her eyes were swollen. Her mascara was ruined. But she was holding something in her hand. She walked to the table and set a key down in front of me. A single brass key on a plain ring. "I didn't know, Myra. But I should have asked. I should have wondered why a man who runs a building supply store could suddenly afford a $400,000 apartment." She paused. "This is yours. It was always yours." I looked at the key, then at Emma. She wasn't apologizing to win points. She was apologizing because the alternative, keeping something stolen, would turn her into the one person she feared becoming, and she knew it. I left at 8:15, said goodbye to Harold, hugged Linda, nodded at Tom. Diane was in the kitchen with the door closed. Richard was still sitting on the hearth, staring at the Christmas tree lights like they might tell him how to reassemble what he'd broken. In my car, I set 3 things on the passenger seat: the keychain, the brass key Emma had given me, and the torn scrap of paper with my name on it. 3 pieces of a story that had taken 2 months to tell itself. I sat in the driveway for a long time with the engine running. Snow had started to fall. The soft kind. The kind that erases footprints. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt lighter. Like someone had been standing on my chest for 14 years and had finally stepped off. My phone buzzed. "June. How'd it go?" "I got my apartment back." A pause. "And your dad?" I watched the snow settle on the windshield. "I got my answer about him too." "You okay?" "I don't know yet. Ask me in a month." I drove back to my studio above the laundromat, climbed the stairs, sat on my bed in the dark and held the keychain in one hand and the brass key in the other. Tomorrow, this room would still be 410 square feet. Mr. Petty would still slide a rent increase under my door. The shower would still run cold on Tuesdays. But somewhere across town, on Crane Street, there was a 2-bedroom apartment with my name about to go on the deed. And for the first time in my life, I owned something that nobody could give to someone else. You can forgive someone and still choose not to stand next to them. I was learning the shape of that sentence. It fit me better than any hand-me-down ever did. 2 weeks after Christmas, the title transfer was complete. My name, Myra Fowler, printed on a deed for the first time in my life. Paul, Harold's attorney, called to confirm. He also told me something Harold had asked him not to mention. Harold had paid Paul's fees out of his own pocket so I wouldn't owe a cent. The fallout in the family was swift and specific. Harold's new will placed Richard's inheritance in a trust managed by Aunt Linda. Richard would receive distributions only with Linda's written approval. Harold told Richard directly, "When you've earned your sister's signature, you'll have earned my trust back." Diane's brother, the one who'd loaned Richard $60,000 for the store, heard about Christmas dinner within a week. Small towns run on gossip the way engines run on gasoline. He called Richard on New Year's Day and demanded full repayment within 90 days. The store was already stretched thin. Now it was bleeding. Diane and Richard argued constantly. With the apartment gone, the arrangement that had held their marriage together, Diane's control in exchange for Richard's compliance, lost its keystone. Linda told me later that Diane spent most of January calling various family members to explain her side. Nobody returned her calls. She posted on Facebook a long paragraph about how family means forgiveness and nobody's perfect. Linda commented underneath, "Try honesty first." It got 47 likes. Emma texted me on January 3rd, short, no excuses. "I'm moving in with a roommate, found a job at a veterinary clinic. I don't want anything from Mom's playbook anymore." I read it twice. Then I wrote back, "Good for you, Emma. I mean that." And I did. She hadn't built the cage. She'd just been born in it. I moved into the Crane Street apartment on a Saturday in mid-January. It was empty. No furniture, no curtains, no dishes. Just clean hardwood floors, white walls, and 2 bedrooms with windows that actually opened when you pushed them. I stood in the kitchen for 10 minutes, running my hand along the counter, opening every cabinet just because I could. The fridge hummed. The faucet ran hot on the first try. There was a dishwasher. I'd never had a dishwasher. June helped me move, which meant she carried 1 lamp and spent 3 hours arranging my 12 books on the built-in shelf while narrating her opinions on each one. She left at sunset and said, "Don't you dare hang that keychain by the door." I hung it by the door. Harold came the following weekend. Linda drove him down from Carver Falls. He wheeled through the front door, stopped in the middle of the empty living room, and looked around. The windows, the light, the space. "It's a good start," he said. I cooked for him that afternoon. His sauce, the one he'd been making since before I was born. Fennel, garlic, San Marzano tomatoes, a pinch of sugar he'd never admit to. First time I made it in a kitchen that was mine. Harold sat at my table, a folding card table I'd bought for $11 at a thrift store, and tasted the sauce from a wooden spoon. "Your grandmother always said a home isn't the walls, it's who you cook for." I set 2 plates, 2 forks, 2 glasses of water. Nothing extravagant, nothing showy. Just an old man and his granddaughter, sharing a meal in a room that was finally, legally, hers. Outside, it was starting to snow again. Inside, the sauce simmered, and the apartment smelled like something I'd been missing for a very long time. Richard called me in February. A Tuesday evening. I was sitting at the card table eating leftovers and going over lab reports. "Myra, it's Dad." "I know." A long breath. "I'm not calling to make excuses. I just want you to know. I'm trying. I started meeting with a counselor. I'm working on things. I appreciate you telling me that. And I understand if you don't want to see me right now. I don't. Not right now. I need space, Dad, and when I'm ready, I'll call. Not because you asked. Because I chose to." "Okay." His voice was thick. "That's fair. One more thing. Diane owes me an apology. Not through you, directly. Until that happens, don't bring her into the conversation." "I understand." We hung up. I sat with the phone on the table for a while, feeling the weight of something I couldn't name. Not closure. Too early for that. Maybe just honesty. The first honest conversation I'd had with my father in years. Diane didn't call, didn't text, didn't apologize. Instead, she posted another essay on Facebook, something about healing journeys and grace for imperfect mothers. No names, no accountability. Linda didn't comment this time. Nobody did. The post got 3 likes, all from Diane's co-workers at the dental office. Harold told me something in March that surprised me. Diane had tried calling him twice. He didn't pick up. "I'll talk to her," he said, "when she talks to you first. That's the order." "You don't have to do that, Grandpa." "I know, but your grandmother would've. And she was smarter than me about most things." I smiled. He smiled. And we went back to talking about the tomato plants he was starting on his windowsill, and whether March was too early to put them outside. It was, but Harold liked to try anyway. I used to think being strong meant not needing anything. I wore my independence like armor. And the people closest to me took advantage of the fact that I never asked them to carry anything. I didn't complain about the small bedroom. I didn't argue about the hand-me-downs. I didn't cry when my dad forgot my birthday 3 years in a row. I called it maturity. I called it resilience. June called it survival mode. She was right. Survival mode isn't living, it's enduring. And there's a version of strength that looks a lot like silence, the kind where you absorb every hit because you've been taught that asking for fairness is the same as being ungrateful. The apartment didn't change my life because of the money. $400,000 is a lot. I won't pretend otherwise. But the thing that actually shifted was simpler than a deed or a title. It was the moment at that dinner table when Harold said my name out loud and told a room full of people that I mattered, that I'd been seen, that someone with authority and credibility and nothing to gain had chosen to stand up and say, "This was wrong, and it stops tonight." I'd waited 26 years for someone to say that, and the person who said it wasn't my father. It was the man my father had tried to convince me was losing his mind. If you're the one in your family who never asks for anything, I want you to sit with a question for a minute. Is it because you don't need things? Or is it because you've been taught that your needs come last? Because those are two very different answers, and one of them will keep you sleeping on a rollaway cot for the rest of your life. I'm not telling you to cut off your family. I'm not telling you to start a fight at Christmas dinner. I'm telling you that you're allowed to have a line, and when someone crosses it, even someone you love, you're allowed to say, "That's enough." Boundaries aren't punishment. They're not revenge. They're just clarity. They're you deciding where you end and someone else's agenda begins. I still talk to Harold every week, Sunday evenings. He tells me about his tomatoes. I tell him about my week at the lab. We argue about whether the Eagles have a real shot this year. He says yes. I say he's biased. He says I'm a pessimist. Neither of us is changing our mind. I send Richard a card on his birthday. I don't call. He doesn't push. We're not close. And I don't know if we ever will be again. But the door isn't locked. It's just closed. And he knows that if he wants it open, the work is on him. Diane and I don't speak. I don't hate her. Hate requires energy I'd rather spend on other things. But I don't owe her a seat at my table, and I'm done pretending that shared meals mean shared values. Emma got a job at a veterinary clinic outside Millbrook. She rents a small place with a roommate and a rescue dog named Captain. We're not close either, but we're honest. She texted me last week. "I'm sorry it took me this long to see it." I wrote back, "Better late than never." Boundaries aren't walls, they're doors. You get to decide who has a key, and if someone took your key and gave it to somebody else, you're allowed to change the locks. This morning, I stood in my kitchen on Crane Street and poured a cup of coffee. The window above the sink faces east, and in the winter, the light comes in low and gold and makes the whole room glow. The keychain still hangs by the front door on a small brass hook I screwed in myself. I didn't throw it away. I thought about it. June told me to burn it twice, but I kept it. It reminds me of two things: what was taken and what I got back. Both worth remembering. The apartment is quiet in the mornings. No laundromat rumbling underneath. No Mr. Petty sliding notes under the door. Just me, the hum of the fridge, and whatever I decide to cook. Harold called while I was finishing my coffee. "I made a batch of sauce this morning. Want me to bring some when Linda drives me down next weekend?" I smiled. "Always, Grandpa." "Good. I used the last of the fennel from the garden. Margaret's seeds. Third generation now. Save me some of those seeds too. Already in an envelope with your name on it." He always does that. Writes my name on things. Seeds, recipes, envelopes, deeds. Like he's reminding the world, and me, that I exist. That I count. My name is Myra Fowler. I'm 26 years old. I'm a lab technician at a community hospital. I drive a 10-year-old Honda and own exactly one piece of furniture I didn't buy secondhand. But I'm standing in a home that has my name on it, not because I fought for it, because someone loved me enough to make sure no one could take it away. And I'm finally learning to do the same thing for myself. That's where my story ends. Or maybe, where it starts. If this story reminded you of someone, or of yourself, I have one ask. Share it. Not for me. For the person in your life who might be carrying a keychain when they deserve the whole apartment. And if you want to hear more stories like this, check the description below. I've linked a few that hit just as hard. Drop a comment and tell me, what would you have done at that dinner table? I read every single one. Thank you for staying until the end. That means the world to me. I'll see you in the next one.